My name is Jamie. I'm just getting my slideshow set up here. Okay. Thank you for inviting me to join you guys. Um, I'm looking forward to I can't wait for the questions and answers. I love to interact with people, and it'll be great to hear what you think of what I have to say and what it made you think about. So I'm just gonna go ahead and jump in, and you'll get to know me as I go through. So, I do have schizophrenia. Actually, I think the technical diagnosis right now is schizoaffective disorder, but they're very similar. When I was diagnosed, it was just schizophrenia. There was no schizoaffective disorder. So I tend to kind of lean toward that one. Um, so just a little bit about who I am. I have been a NAMI Connections facilitator. I facilitated for several years. When I started going back to school, I was not able to continue facilitating. So it's been a couple of years since I've been in the NAMI environment. I am on the New Mexico Behavioral Health Planning Council. I did receive the Star Award in 2022. Um, I have been given the UNM Preceptor of the Year award. Um, and I am the first recipient of the Recovering Healer Scholarship, which is an awesome program you guys should hear about. It's for certified peer support workers to get their master's in social work. So they have a dual certification in CPSW and social work. So I want to tell a little bit about my experience with schizophrenia. When I was 15, God came down and talked to me and told me that I was going to die in Africa, um, in front of a firing squad because I refused to participate in the apartheid. Um, at that same point in time, I was assigned what I called my guardian. Or yeah. Um, and he was a man that stood 5 feet behind me all the time and followed me around and threatened to rape or kill me if I did anything wrong. And I thought it was normal. I didn't realize that not every 16-year-old had a chaperone or a guardian that followed her around. So I never told anybody. Nobody understood what was going on. I faked it really well until I was about 19. Um, I was starting at the University of New Mexico, and um, one night I went to go to the computer lab to send my boyfriend an email, and I couldn't remember how to get to the computer lab. And someone had told me to go to the psych center if things got bad. So I tried to go to the psych center, but when I got to Lomas, I couldn't remember how to cross the street. So I wandered around in the parking lot, finally found my way out, and a good Samaritan helped me get to the psych center. And my parents came and met me at the psych center. And the psychiatrist said that nothing was wrong. I was just an emotional 2-year-old having an emotional temper tantrum, and I needed emotional parenting from someone other than my parents, who obviously screwed up the first time. And that was my first experience with the psychiatric system. Um, this unbelief that anything was wrong, that I was okay, and I just needed emotional parenting. Um, Luckily, my parents didn't believe that and kept pushing to get me treatment. And I was diagnosed in 6 months with schizophrenia. From the get-go, I was an advocate. I went to high schools and I talked to the health classes about mental illness. And I would try to get, schizophrenia up on the board as a mental illness. And I'd ask them, okay, ask me your questions. What do you want to know about schizophrenia? And every class but one said, have you killed somebody? And I'd say, no, have you? And they'd look at me like, well, how dare you ask me that question? I'm like, well, why did you ask me that question? But the stigma was definitely there. Um, that, you know, schizophrenia was a violent diagnosis, and it's really not. Um, so ever since then, I've been fighting for um, understanding and acceptance of mental illness in general, not just schizophrenia, but all the different mental illnesses that our society has often put in marginalized roles. I was told that the best thing I could hope for my life would be to live in a group home and attend a day program. And that would be if I'm lucky and if my symptoms got under control. Nobody believed in me. Nothing was expected of me. I was told to have the lowest, the least stressful life I could possibly leave. But we found a program in Western Massachusetts called Gould Farm. It's a working farm that works with people who have mental illness, and it helps them learn how to manage their symptoms well enough to be able to work a 30-hour week. And they believed in me. They believed that, yes, I can work. Yes, I can give back to society. Yes, I am an important and valuable part of this world. And they were the first ones that believed in me and thought that I could do more than live in a group home and go to a day program. And that belief changed my life. I became a stronger advocate. I um, went to school. I was able to do more than was ever expected of me at first. Um, so I have had voices since I was 15, and it's kind of this weird experience of being in what I call the shared reality and being in my personal reality. Um, the voices I hear, I now understand other people don't hear. The shared reality is what other people experience. My reality is what I experience that I recognize is not necessarily the same. So living in those two worlds can be difficult at times. And at one point in my life, there was this, I call it Teletubby land, this, bright psychedelic colors and this human-sized parrot and mushroom men and talking flowers. And the parrot said, you can come live with us and have no stress and no responsibilities, and you can just live in Teletubby land the rest of your life. But the catch was that I could not come back. And I made a conscious decision at that point in time to live in the shared reality, to live with other people and to not go off in my life. And I believe that choice has led me to a point where I'm productive and I'm responsible and I can do things that were never expected of me. And even though I've lived with schizophrenia for 35 years, I'm functioning, I'm working, I'm doing the things that I love and that I want to do. So I got my bachelor's in sign language interpreting at the University of New Mexico. Um, I spent 2 years in Baltimore working as a sign language interpreter. I tried to start an intentional community shaped on Gould Farm, the farm that believed in me, called Community First Housing. And so for 4 years, we had a community that supported people with mental illness. Unfortunately, we were not able to continue, but it's still something in that I'm passionate about, supporting people with mental illness to do their best. And in that passion, I have become a certified peer support worker. For the last about 10 years, I worked as a CPSW, and I absolutely love my job, or loved. I'm in school now, but I worked for the Assertive Community Treatment Team at UNMH, which is a team. It's actually a NAMI-based program. NAMI started the ACT team, and we work with people who are high-end users. Spend a lot of time in the hospital, a lot of time in the emergency room, and it's a wraparound program. And being the peer support worker, I was the one who went in at the base level. I made the relationships. inspired the trust that allowed the other people to do their jobs. So my relationship building was the basis and foundation of the rest of the work that everybody else did. I'm now at the New Mexico Highlands University in their master's in social work program. I have 3 semesters left. I've been going part-time because I've been working. However, my voices started to come back and I had to stop working. So now I am a student. And I'm excited to see what path I get as a CPSW and a social worker. They don't always agree. So figuring out where I land in that dichotomy will be an important part of developing who I am. So John was an important part of who I am. John Tripp Peterson was my husband. So we met, I was in a water exercise class and his mom came to my water exercise class and then she invited John and John came and we hung out and we talked and we enjoyed being together. And one day I yawned and John goes, there's 5 different kinds of yawns. And I thought, wow, this guy knows how many kinds of yawns there are. And I thought that was really cool. So we exchanged phone numbers. This was on a Monday. And on Tuesday, we talked for like an hour and a half on the phone and decided that Friday we were going to go out to eat. Wasn't a date. It was just, we're going to go out to eat. But then on Thursdays, my Community First Housing, the community that I was trying to build, had a potluck. So, I'll invite John. So John came to our potluck and I drove him home and we sat in the car and we started kissing. And we say we had our first kiss before our first date. From there it just clicked. We were right for each other. We were very much involved in each other's lives. John had autism and a psychiatric disorder. And in Albuquerque, he got a lot of support from the developmental disability world. We moved to Boston because I had connections out there. I was running a group home for adult men who have mental illness and are deaf. And so it was a great job. It was a good experience. But the Boston area did not have any support for autism. So John fell completely on the psychiatric system. And the psychiatric system did not understand his developmental needs. They didn't understand autism. They didn't know how to support him in the different ways that he needed to be supported. And so he ended up chronically in and out of the hospital. And at one point in time, John and I were both in the psych hospital at the same hospital at the same time, but we were on different units. We were not allowed to be on the same unit because of HIPAA. And they told us that we could see each other, even though we're in the same hospital, we're both on psych units, we couldn't see each other. And his psychiatrist on the unit said, you know what? Jamie is an important part of his life. He's not going to heal without her. So she wrote a prescription and said, John will see Jamie 1 hour every day. And she'd walk him down and we'd get an hour in the library and then she'd walk him back up. And she got it. She was one of the few people who got it, that it's important for us to have those relationships. It's important for us to be in each other's lives. And it's very often that when we think about disability or mental illness or things like that, we don't think about committed, romantic, involved relationships. We kind of slide that part of humanity out of our concept of a person with a mental illness or a person with autism or person with Down syndrome, or we tend to kind of just ignore that part of who they are. Um, so I think it's really important that we support and encourage people to be fully human, including being sexual, including being in relationships, including having a family if that's what that person wants. Um, in Boston, John was sent to a group home, and I was not allowed to go because I was a woman and I didn't need group home level of care. So I lived 15 minutes away from him, and we had dinner 4 nights a week, and that was it. So it was a very difficult experience. We moved back to Albuquerque. We were here, and John ended up going to the state hospital in Las Vegas to the BHI, Behavioral Health Institute. He was there for 24 hours, and they overdosed him, and he died. Um, so I lost him about 5 years ago. Um, and since his death, when he died, they did not even note that he had autism. There was no record that he had developmental disabilities. He was not being treated for his full range of needs, including psychiatric and developmental disability needs. So after he died, his mother and I have been on a quest to get educational credentials, CEUs, for people in the psychiatric field to work with people in the developmental disability world, because there's a disconnect. These two worlds don't work together, and they need to, because there's a high population of people who have developmental disabilities that also end up with psychiatric disabilities. So it's a big ask, and so we're hoping to we passed some legislation that has done a research and looked at, yes, we do need these educational credentials, and so now we're working toward how do we implement getting these educational credentials, so that people are educated to work in both fields, and not just psychiatry. So, some of the questions that I was sent, was about, like, well, what is the experience of schizophrenia? And I like to tell people that the illness itself makes you think you're not ill. I believed I was going to Africa. I had no ticket to go to Africa. I had no plans to go to Africa. I didn't really even know where Africa was, but I believed that I was going to die in Africa. The very illness itself makes you think what you're experiencing is real and is like everybody else's experience, even though it's not. Um, it tricks your brain into thinking um, that you're fine, and you do outrageous things, and you don't think they're outrageous. You don't understand that they're strange and different, and people don't get it because you get it, because your brain just isn't functioning the way other people's brains function. And I like to tell people that when I hear something, when I hear, Tom talk to me, or I hear my teachers talk to me, my brain does certain things. When I hear my voices, my brain does those exact same things. So I am actually hearing those voices. It's not like they're being made up. My brain is doing the same thing it does when I hear everybody else's voices. And I think that's important. People to understand that I really am hearing them. You're not hearing them. They're not part of this shared reality. They're part of my personal reality. Um, Sometimes I think schizophrenia is scary to people who don't have schizophrenia, because there's just enough of it that people connect with and say, oh, well, that could be me. Like, well, yeah, I've heard somebody calling my name in the night and woke up and I didn't know who was there. Like, there's just enough that's understood that's like, oh my God, I could be going off the deep end too. And it's not, at the same time, They don't understand why we're responding the way we're responding. And it's scary to think that somebody's experiencing something that is so different that you just don't get it. That's just a scary part of schizophrenia. But as you live it, as you work to learn how to combine those two realities, it gets less scary. And when we talk about it, when I talk to groups, when I talk to high school students, or when I work with people that I work with in ACT, every time I tell the story about schizophrenia, it gets a little less scary, it gets a little easier to understand. Um, and I language is a big thing for me. Um, I have schizophrenia. I am not a schizophrenic. There's a difference. Um, and I told somebody I worked with that, and he goes, "You mean I'm not an old, stupid schizophrenic?" I said, "No, you're a person who likes I Ching and who likes Tai Chi and who enjoys his nephews, and you have schizophrenia." And it just changed his worldview. It changed his view of himself to be able to understand that I am not my diagnosis. I am not defined by this illness. It's just part of who I am. Um, So I want to talk just a little bit about schizophrenia. Schizophrenia usually shows up in the teens to early 20s. Um, there have been some people who have a schizophrenia as young as 6. Um, so that there is the early onset schizophrenia, but for the most part, it shows up in the teens and early 20s. And there are some people who have onset in their 30s or 40s, but for the most part, it's young adult life that it sets in. Um, there's not really, as far as I know, um, a lot of understanding about the genetic components or the social components or nature versus nurture. Not a lot of understanding as to what happens, other than knowing that it is a brain disease and your brain functions differently. You've got too much dopamine, and it causes things. There is such a thing as drug-induced schizophrenia. Sometimes people use different drugs and it kind of triggers a psychotic break, and they end up with a diagnosis of schizophrenia. Sometimes trauma can create psychosis. So there's a diagnosis that's not very common, that's schizotypal personality disorder, and that usually is connected to trauma. So there is some connection in that way. Um, I believe, and I have not read any papers on this, and I haven't talked to my doctor about it, that for me, my schizophrenia is related to my hormones, because when I went through puberty is when I started hearing voices. And during my menstrual periods, my voices would get worse. And when I hit menopause, my voices got better. Um, so I believe there's a hormone connection, but I can't prove it. I can't, say for certain that that's what's actually going on. So the biggest thing I want to leave with you tonight is belief. Believe that there's life after schizophrenia. Believe that the people who have this illness can and do achieve amazing things. Believe that people can do more than live in a group home and go to a day program. And the other thing also is believing in support. If you're a family member here tonight, that support that you give your family member, that belief that says you can do this, will empower that family member to do more than they ever thought they could. Sometimes schizophrenia is a very isolating diagnosis, um, because you're in your personal reality. You're not in the shared reality, and people don't get why you're talking to the person next to you when they don't see that person next to you. And so having that person who says, "I don't care who you're yelling at. I just want you to know that I'm here. And when you're ready to go shopping, we'll go shopping." Um, And don't give up. Don't ever give up on the people in your life. Pat Deacon was one of the first movers and shakers in Boston about the peer um, culture. And she lived with her grandmother. And every Sunday, her grandmother would ask her, "Do you want to go grocery shopping?" And she would say no. And then one Sunday, she said yes. And sometimes it takes 100 no's to get to a yes. Don't ever give up on the person you're working with, and recognize that they have the power to do whatever it is they really, really want to do. And I think it's encouraging to see that our social fabric is changing. When I got sick, all of my friends disappeared. I lost all of my connections. The only people that were in my life were either related to me or paid to talk to me. My niece has DID. Her friends are still there. They see her every week. They talk to her. They understand when she goes through changes. They get it. I think our society is changing. I think if I went into high schools now and talked to them about schizophrenia, maybe only 7 out of 10 classes would ask me if I killed somebody. I think we're making an impact. I think we're changing society. And NAMI is a big part of that, because NAMI is out there and says, this is real. We need families. We need peers. We're doing this together. And I think that you guys are making the difference in how our society sees mental illness. All right, so that's it. So I hope I said something good. And I would like to open it up for questions.
Fantastic. Thank you. Jessica, you got a hand up?
Yes, I have a question from the chat. As a social worker, it's awesome to see you in the work. Your voice is so valuable. You talked about a difference or contrast between your social work training and peer recovery support. What are some of those differences, and how do you decide what you'll follow?
Okay, that's a good question. The first two differences that come to mind are about self-disclosure and gifts. Um, so in social work, you're really not supposed to talk about yourself. You're not supposed to connect with the person using your own experience. As a certified peer support worker, that is your job. Like your whole job is to use your experience to connect with other people and to make that relationship grow, because they understand you've been there, done that, you know what you're talking about. So I don't know who I'll be seeing as the people that I support, and I do choose to say the people I support, not the patients or clients or consumers. These are the people that I am supporting. Um, and if it's appropriate and if it helps the situation, I'll tell them about my experience. I will use that gift to be able to build that relationship. Even though in social work, that's a big no-no. The other thing is that in social work, you're not allowed to accept gifts. And I think that that's an incredibly undermining thing to put out there. As a support worker, you're allowed to accept gifts up to $20. And I think for me, gift giving is part of our society. It's part of being quote unquote normal. It's important to be able to feel like you have something to give to a person in your life. And so to be able to give a gift is an empowering, powerful thing to do. And if you've got this person sitting next to you who have talked to you for the last 2 years about your most intimate things, and to them to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't accept that gift," that doesn't feel good. That hurts. That's hard. Um, And kind of the same thing with self disclosure. If you're telling me about the intimate parts of your life, um, the best, the most respectful thing I can do is let you into my life. It's disrespectful to think that I'm going to ask you to tell me all the stuff about you, but you can't know anything about me. Like, that's just not right in my viewpoint. Um, so those are just two of the differences that I will have to be navigating. I hope that answers your question.
Do you have the next one, Jess?
Sure. So let me see.
I'll ask it. I've got it right here.
Okay, that other one
What
was.
areas of growth do you think need to incur in? Well, let me back up. I'm one question ahead. Hang on. Are there stress reduction techniques you use when the voices are more prevalent?
Oh, absolutely. Um, well, in social work, they talk a lot about self-care. What are you doing for self-care? And this is something that's built into the CPSW social life is, I got to take care of myself. That thing about your airline mask falling down, put yours on first before you can help somebody else. Um, so one of the things that I do as an ongoing self-care thing is I try to go to water exercise classes 3 times a week. Um, and that's very good for me to be able to care for myself. Um, while I have the voices, like if I'm actively hearing voices, um, actually something I learned at NAMI was to chew crunchy foods, like eat potato chips or popcorn or carrots. Carrots work really well. Um, or I will pace. I will mutter under my breath and yell at my voices. Um, Sometimes medicine helps, Clonopin helps sometimes, not always. Being around people where I can just say, you know what, I'm not okay. And they're there with me. They've let me go through it, but they're not, pushy or anything. They're there and they're supportive. And I know they understand what I'm going through. Um, so that's really important. Being around people that love and support me is very important.
Thank you very much. Uh, the next question is, what areas of growth do you think need to occur in society now with regard to mental, understanding of mental illness?
Um, the first thing that comes to mind is, and I'm not sure how to phrase this, but de-violencing the view of mental illness. It makes me very upset. Anytime there's a mass shooting or a bombing or something, they say, oh, well, that person had mental health issues. And it's not always true. And the last statistic I saw was that the general population is 5% violent and the schizophrenic population is 2% violent. We're actually less violent than the general population, but yet we're blamed for more of the violent outbursts than anybody else. And so um, I think as we start to look at society's view of people with mental illness, um, we need to make that disconnection, that that we're not a violent group of people. Um, and I think media has an awful lot to do with that. And I think the more that we share our stories, the more that we get out there and talk about how our lives go and what we do, um, I think that is going to change the fabric of our society. Um, and looking at people as whole people, not as diagnoses, not as problems, but as people who see the world differently, and how can we include them in all aspects of their life, including relationships, and sexual experiences. So, um, just seeing people as people really is the most important thing.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that answer. We have some hands up, and I was going to go to them next. Teresa, do you want to ask your question, please?
Sure. Um, Hi, thank you for sharing. It's really great information and a perspective that is really helpful. My son and my mom both have schizophrenia. Um, and I kind of, because I'm a social worker, also wonder if they might have a form of autism. They're kind of very in their own world. Um, So I guess one thing that I struggle with is, I have my perception of what reality is, and there's a large gap between the way they see things, especially my son. He lives with me. He's almost 29. What are some things that you have felt helpful to kind of get you to be more aware of just uh a healthier lifestyle? Because my son really struggles with that. For instance, he drank 12 energy drinks within a 12-hour period because he wants to stay up, and he's creative, but I'm really struggling with trying to encourage him. And I'm trying to take off my social work hat when I'm home, but it's hard. It's a hard thing to navigate with him.
Um, First thing, I've been on Clozaril for over 20 years, and it makes me tired. And over the last 2 years, I've been going down on my Clozaril, and for the first time in 20 years, I have energy. I have, you know, over the last 20 or 30 years, I wake up ready to go back to bed. I have no energy. So the energy drink thing, I totally get. Um, because, the medication is hard on your body. Um, and for me, it's helped. For me, it's made a difference, but it is hard on my body. Um, as far as getting into the shared reality, a couple things come up for me. One is routine. It's really important to have a routine, even if that's, working out 3 days a week and going to the library 2 days a week and, something that gets you out of bed and gets you going to do something else, like a routine where and especially where you're expected to show up and help. And again, that belief that yes, you can do it. Yes, you can belong. Yes, you can be part of it. And having the expectation that I'm not going to cook for you every night. You have to cook at least one night a week, or you have to clean your bedroom at least once a week, or having, expectations, realistic expectations, but expectations that, you need to take control of your life. You need to be responsible. Just because you have schizophrenia doesn't mean you get to sit in your room and watch and play video games all day. Like, you still have responsibilities. And that's important because it makes the person feel worthwhile. It makes the person feel like they have something to contribute. They're important. The best thing that they can do is not stay in a group home and go to a day program. Um, they're worth it. They're invested in. They're important. And I think that's the key of any type of movement is feeling worth and feeling important.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Our next question comes from Gary. Gary, do you want to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Tom. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
My question was, do you think the schizophrenia or the medications affect you in mental aspects such as focus and memory and emotion and stress? that make it hard to accomplish work or your schooling or other tasks, um, or even physical limitations such as an effect on motor skills?
Yes. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
said, I have been tired for the last 20 years of my life. Um, I only get out of bed because I have to be at work at 7:30, and so I have to get up at 6:30 to get there on time. Um, so that outside structure, that outside timeline that says you have to do this, like that's what gets me out of bed. That's why I do things. Um, and so the medication is definitely um involved in that. Um, Weight gain has been a huge issue for me with the medication. Um, and that's, doing my 3 times a week of water exercise is really important to kind of counterbalance that. Um, I have gone through ECT treatments, electroconvulsion therapy treatments, um, and it totally affected my memory. My husband finally said, he says, you know what? You cannot go back to those treatments because you can't remember enough words to carry on a conversation. Um, so that definitely made a difference. Um, I think that there are probably many more ways that I'm affected that I've just developed coping skills for, and I haven't really identified each specific thing that's happened, but yes, medication. And it's a toss up. Some people would rather be psychotic than deal with the side effects of the medication. I get restless legs a lot. I have a hard time falling asleep. Um, there's a lot of things that happen because of the medication. But for me, it helps keep the voices under control, and I'm willing to make that exchange.
Thank you
Thank you so
very much.
much. Yes. Thank you, Tom.
Sure thing, Gary. Uh, there's one more question in the chat that I wanted to bring up. There may be more. So, okay, here's one. What's the best way to support someone who is nervous about seeking support regarding the voices they're hearing?
Normalization. Make it not be a big deal, like it's and I think this could also go back to the question about societal changes, making it not be a big deal that you're hearing voices. And this is just another step to help you do your life the way you want to do it best. Um, I have a friend who talks about casserole illnesses. When you break your leg, people bring you dinner. When you have cancer, people bring you casseroles. When you have a baby, they bring you food. But when you have a mental illness, when you have your psychotic break, they all turn around and start whispering. Um, so making it on the same level and the same normalcy as breaking your leg, like that makes a difference, and just being able to talk about it and not be like, oh, she's hearing voices again. What do I do? Oh, okay, your voices are back. Well, why don't we go play dominoes? Would that help you? Um, and just kind of letting it go, letting life happen. This is not like the end of the world because I'm hearing voices. Um, and so, just kind of that idea that this is just part of your life. This is what you live with. I live with other things. You live with this. That's just part of where we're at and what we're doing. Um, but when you make it a big deal, when you make it on a level different than any other aspect of your life, that's what scares people. What keeps people from getting help because they're worried that they're going to be labeled crazy or that people aren't going to accept them or that something bad's going to happen because they see a psychiatrist.
Thank you very much. Let me go on to the next one. And this is just elaborating on something you already said that they're asking for. But you mentioned that you've gotten pretty good at recognizing the difference between your reality versus the shared reality. How do you go about recognizing the difference?
Um, people's faces. When I'm experiencing voices or I'm talking to the parrot in Teletubby Land, and somebody looks at me like they haven't got a clue what I'm talking about, it's like, okay, maybe that's my reality and not their reality. Um, um, for me, and I don't know this about other people, but I physically feel different in my body when my voices get bad. Like, I physically feel different. So I can say, oh, I think that's my voices because I realize that I'm feeling different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know if that's something that everybody experiences or not, but that is my experience. And kind of reading the clues in my environment. Sometimes when I see people standing there, they have a different quality, and I can be like, oh, those are people in my reality, not people in the shared reality. Um, so there are cues in my reality that I go, okay, wait, I think that's something that other people aren't experiencing. But when they look at you like wild frogs are coming out of your mouth, it's like, okay, I think that's my reality and not theirs. Um, yeah, that's kind of one of the ways that I do it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Uh, Let me see. We'll send you the chat because there are just a lot of really positive supporting statements. But here's another good one. How did you go back to work without getting overwhelmed?
Um, I started part-time. I started working 13 hours a week, and then I slowly worked up. Um, I got to the point where Social Security said I was able to work and I could no longer receive Social Security. So I had to go back. So I tried finding a full-time job, and my mother-in-law and my mother and her partner sat me down and said, "You cannot work a full-time job. You're getting worse. Things are not good. You cannot do this." Um, so I went back to looking for a part-time job, and the UNMH peer support position was a point 0.8 position. So I worked 4 days a week instead of 5 days a week, and that ended up being the right balance. But for the first year or two, that's all I did was work and rest. I couldn't have time in my life for anything else. Um, so I have developed the skills to take care of myself in ways that I'm going to school. I'm going to grad school. Like, I never expected to be doing that. I never thought that was a possibility. Um, so it's taken a long time. It's been 17 years since I got my bachelor's. Um, and I just do it step by step, a little bit here and a little bit there, and then all of a sudden I'm in school or I'm working or um so yeah, it just and I think I use my supports and my resources really well. I use supervision at work really well. Like, that's one of my self-care things is using supervision. I talk to my therapist, I talk to my doctor, I talk to my family. Um, I get support from those around me.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I see a hand up from Terry. Terry, you want to ask a question?
Actually, I don't have a question. I just want to make a comment. I so appreciate you, Jamie. As somebody who supports family members that deal with psychotic illnesses, your resilience, your positivity are an inspiration and lead to us and part of NAMI's mission. You are not alone, normalizing what we're all here to advocate for. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Terry. Amber, do you have a question or a comment?
I do have a question. Within your experience of working with the community, have you ever come across a person who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and was self-medicating with drugs and alcohol and have their symptoms be really bad and be able to watch them transition to more healthier copings? I don't know if that question makes sense.
So what I think you're asking is, have I seen somebody with extreme symptoms, including substance use, you said?
Correct.
Okay. And have I seen them get to a point where they can move on?
Correct.
Okay. Yes. I would say that's a point where peers become extremely important. Having somebody who can say, I was so psychotic that I could not be sober 10 minutes or things would go out of control. But now I haven't had a drink in a year. It's that hope, it's that belief that, okay, things really suck right now. And I understand that you are so bothered by your voices, that your delusions are so scary, that your experiences are so terrifying, that the only thing you can think to do is smoke weed. But I believe that we'll get through this. We'll find a way to get past the alcohol and the drugs and whatever it is you're using and start dealing with, how do we make your illness less terrifying? How do we get you to a point where you're safe in your own skin and you're not terrified of what those voices are going to tell you? So that peer support, that ability for someone to say, been there, done that, this is not the end of the road. This is not the worst thing that's going to happen in your life. We can make this work. That peer support is incredibly important. And it makes a huge difference in that person's ability to move on and to learn to take responsibility for their life. So that belief, that cognizant, yes, I think you can do this, is really important.
Okay. Did the symptoms change?
With drugs and alcohol, you mean?
No, I mean in the sense of if they come to a point of a better um oh my gosh, better coping.
Yes and no.
Huh?
Sometimes the symptoms do change.
Uh-huh.
So sometimes, like my symptoms have changed. I'm in a much better place. But I would say I made progress even when the symptoms were not changing. It's how I learned to look at it and see it and accept it and understand it and not fight back. Sometimes I talk about like how when the voices get really bad and I'm like, you fucking idiot, and I'm like yelling at them stuff, I'm feeding them energy and they're feeding off that energy and getting worse and louder and
Right.
harder. And so being able to say, okay, I hear you, but I'm not going to talk to you. They don't have energy. They don't have food. They can't get worse because I'm ignoring them. But it's first nature. It's not the first thing you think of to ignore them. The first thing you think of is to yell and get them to shut up and go away.
Right.
So making that switch between I'm giving them energy, I'm feeding them energy, to I'll let them do their thing and I'll do my thing and we'll both coexist and be okay. So yes,
I like
sometimes
it.
symptoms change and sometimes they don't.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're
Yes.
welcome.
Well, probably got time for one more question, maybe two. And I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions, and they were great questions and great stories in the chat. So I hope people had a chance to look at them. And Jamie, afterwards, we'll send you a email of the chat so you'll at least see what everybody said.
I would love that. That would be great.
But this is a really important question to me as well as I'm sure the person who asked it. What encouragement or advice would you give to a young teen with this diagnosis? And what should the parents do to help?
So the first thing that comes to mind is don't hide it. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't be scared of it. Don't let it make you isolate. Like, this is just a bump in the road. This is just something that is going to shape who you become and what you do, but it doesn't define you, and it doesn't have to define the way your friends see you or the way your family sees you. You don't have to be embarrassed. This is not going to ruin your life. And I know, it's confusing because you don't know what is in your reality, what is in other people's reality. Um, you don't have the experiences to be able to see that it will get better. Um, um, it's okay. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to not understand what's going on in your brain, in your body. Um, for families and friends, I would say don't give up. Um, be there for the person. Understand that what they talk about might be weird, but that's okay. It's okay to not be on the same page with the other person all the time. It's okay to be a little bit different, be a little bit weird. Um, and don't ever give up. Don't ever give up on believing that that person can do what they want to do. Belief is huge. Expectation is huge. I expect you to get on with your life. I expect you to learn how to cope well enough that this becomes a bump in the road, not a mountain on top of a railroad. Like, you can do this. I'm here. I'll help you. I'll walk with you, but you can do this.
I think that is the most fantastic statement that we could end this on. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for an absolutely fantastic, uplifting presentation. You probably made my whole week, and I am so grateful to you for spending time with this. And I'd like to thank everybody who joined us here, all the people who asked questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to them all, but Jamie, I'd like to say we might ask you to come back next year and tell us a little more about how you've progressed in your program and what else you've learned, because I really feel that we have been given a great gift in your presentation, and I thank you for it.
Well, thank you for the invite. I really was glad to be here tonight.